What's up, Jets fans, and welcome to Ep.6 of JetNation Live. We are your hosts, Dylan Tereman and Glenn Naughton. If you can hear my voice, it's not 100% still on a Thursday. I lost my voice in the first quarter of that win because we squished the fish 40-7. The Jets came into MetLife. The Dolphins fans thought they were going to take it over. They were all on Twitter saying, let's take over the stadium, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, I was nervous at first. The stadium looked a little empty during the national anthem and during intros. And I put a video on Twitter. I was like, there's a lot of teal and orange in this stadium. As soon as kickoff happened, it was just a flood of green getting to their seats, and it was a great time from start to finish. Everything happened in our end zone, starting from the sauce safety that you see in the background of our video. Glenn, how are we doing? 3-2, big win in the division, first win in 3 years. It's got to feel good, right?
Listen, you can't not feel great about it. And as you said, I said it the other day. I've probably enjoyed the complaining of the Miami fans as much as I enjoyed the win itself. It really has been. I mean, it's still today. Thursday?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they got a game in 2 days, and they're still talking about the Jets.
Amazing.
It's fantastic. The excuses are amazing. And listen, that obviously there is some merit to would it have been a better game for them if Teddy was under center? Probably, but I don't know when Teddy Bridgewater became Patrick Mahomes. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
It's like this foregone conclusion that if we had Teddy, what maybe more. Listen, as I said, Tyreek Hill had some catches. It's not like they didn't get the ball to him. The Jets secondary just clamped down on him. He had 7 grabs,
sure.
and he averaged like 6, 7, 8 a catch. So I don't get this. I mean, I understand they're angry, and I think a lot of fans are going to be angry this year after they play the Jets.
Absolutely.
Because they're used to the media telling them how bad the Jets are and how bad the Jets are going to be, and they circle it as a win on their calendar. And they're better than a lot of people expected. Even, we still have, obviously some tougher opponents coming up. But even just the way they've played thus far, I mean, I think we said, I'm going off memory here, but I'm sure we had a show, or I may have been an article, something where we talked about how much better certain position groups were. And I think that kind of started with corner and tight end. And we're seeing it play out this season. Although the tight ends didn't have a huge impact this weekend. But the corners, from what they had last year to what they have this year, that alone is going to keep them in games. And that's what we're seeing. And again, fans aren't liking it. I actually, for the first time in years, had a Dolphins fan walk up to me, and we ended up having a nice conversation, but it started up with him just coming up to me, and I don't know the guy. I was at my kid's jiu-jitsu lesson, and this guy I never met before walks up to me and he just goes, "Our third string quarterback. That's why you won." And I was like, "Scored 40." We didn't. It wasn't a 12-7 game where you're like, "Oh man, we would have won if we had Teddy." He gave up 40. So feeling good, but listen, at the end of the day, they didn't face Aaron Rodgers. They'll do that this weekend, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I think the not the tip of the iceberg, but the best part of the whole Dolphins spiraling out of control from one loss to the Jets, I think, is this. It's probably much to do about nothing, but this ping pong table situation in their locker room. They removed a ping pong table, and I think I've seen 4 articles, at least in the past 48 hours, about Tyreek Hill and his answer on the ping pong table. So if that's what you're doing when you're 3-0, I'm sorry, you aren't cut out for it. And now you're 3-2 because of it. I heard your recap the other day, Monday morning. The Jets have had this excuse so many times, or could have had this excuse of a third string quarterback, or we have 19 guys on the injured reserve list, whatever. You can go down the list of excuses you want to make, referees, whatever, bad coaching. I don't care. The Dolphins just weren't the better team. And I tweeted that out. It's just Dolphins fans need to stop, get over it, look at your next game in 2 days, and stop worrying about this damn ping pong table and the Jets. Because if the Jets are putting this much into your head, we don't play you again until week 17. So it's going to be a long season for them coming out of it. All right, let's get into the topics. We'll get into a full Dolphins recap. We're going to talk about injuries. We have a couple of them that are noteworthy. We're going to talk about the Packers. Obviously, you teased it there. We will be playing Aaron Rodgers this week, our best quarterback opponent so far this year. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is a great quarterback, and Joe Burrow is an ascending talent. But Aaron Rodgers is the best guy. So we're going to get into the Packers, and then of course we're going to talk about our NFL draft talk at the end of the pod here if we fit in the time. So right off the bat, Dolphins beat down. Like I mentioned before, I was there. Everything happened in our end zone. First play on defense, Sauce Gardner hits Teddy Bridgewater right in the elbow. It's our background for tonight. And the crowd just erupted. And from there, I don't think many people in my section sat down because that's how exciting it was. From start to finish, there was a lull for like the beginning of the third quarter, end of the second quarter, but for the first quarter and the fourth quarter, we were standing on every single, maybe first down, we sat down. Then second down, we all stood up and just were banging on the seats. It was amazing. I think game plan wise, and obviously I haven't watched the full recap because I was there, so it's a lot different looking at it in person as opposed to on TV. I think it was their best game plan. They utilized both their running backs, Breece Hall, Michael Carter. Breece Hall had a phenomenal day. If it wasn't for Sauce Gardner having an absolute better day, you could say, he probably would have got the second Pepsi Zero Sugar Rookie of the Week belt. But it comes back to Florham Park anyway in Sauce Gardner's around Sauce Gardner's waist this time. But how did you feel about Breece Hall and Michael Carter and the way that they used these two? Because I saw a lot of 22, 21 personnel, and they were really getting after it with these RPO swings with Breece Hall, but they would just hand it to Michael. And then they had Breece Hall go on the wheel route, and you saw what happened. Wide open man-to-man, 80 yards. So how did you feel about the wide receivers, and is this something we need to see moving forward?
I mean, I loved it, obviously, because of the success, but I liked it. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I feel like we saw a lot more outside stuff this week. In previous weeks, it felt like they were almost exclusively up the middle and kind of giving defenses a little bit less to think about. I liked seeing them both utilized. I like that they changed it up in terms of getting outside the tackles. I like that we saw Michael Carter, out there throwing some blocks on some runs and kind of use him in that role. He's not the biggest guy, but the guy gets after it. And in the passing game, the screen I mentioned in the post game, the screen and swing game was much better than it's been this year, and kind of back to where it was late last year. It had come along. Early on, Zach had those struggles that had all of us a little bit worried, but there was no issues with that this week. So using those two guys and listen, we've talked about how, because of the amount of talent this team has now, that different guys are going to flash every week because, but we didn't really go into how that'll happen on we always talk about how the backs can catch the ball out of the backfield, but we hadn't really talked about weeks where they might be the featured receivers and they might be the guys putting up the biggest numbers. So it's just one more thing for defenses to think about that you have to love. You can go in, now when you're playing Zach Wilson and the Jets, you got to think twice before you say, well, let's just bring the house and blitz the hell out of them. Okay, well, that's fine, but then you're going to have Breece Hall, on the outside, possibly getting a mismatch. And if you have an extra defender or two in the backfield while he's going in the opposite direction, just a shame. I mean, they won the game. That's what matters, really. But, I mean, the guy literally was 2 yards away from a 3-touchdown day, taken down the 1 yard line twice. So that was a little bit of a shame, but just I love the way they both got involved. I love the way Zach looked in the short passing game, and I loved watching Breece Hall drag Miami defenders down toward the end zone.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that because he ended with 18 carries for 97 yards on the ground, and 18 carries is his biggest workload of the season. But I was like, you couldn't just fit in one more run for 3 yards. He's going to get it. So just to put that 100-yard rushing, 100-yard receiving game for Breece Hall. But the snap count was interesting. He had 41 snaps, which was 69.5%. And Michael Carter only had 25. So 16 snaps more than Michael Carter. And like we talked about the last 2 weeks, I think this has become a trend now where Breece Hall is slowly going to get more and more. I didn't expect it to be quite 70-30. I didn't think Breece Hall would get that much, but at this rate, Breece Hall looks like the best rookie running back outside of maybe Dameon Pierce. So just keep feeding him. Every time he touched the ball in the stadium, everybody went Breece, and it was it vibrated the whole stadium. It was a great feeling. So to have rookie playmakers, and that's something that Saleh and LaFleur have talked about all summer long, having playmakers that can get you 1 to 2 yard drives or 1 to 2 play drives, on offense, get off the field quickly, 70 yards, 80 yards down the field. Breece Hall is that guy. We saw it finally. He got down to the 1. It's really unfortunate, but that's going to be every week. Michael Carter's going to get down to the 1, and Breece Hall will pound it in. So I love the backfield duo. I think it's going to be the foundation of this offense. As long as Zach Wilson, like we said, eliminate 55 dropbacks a game. He had 26 or something like that, according to PFF, with 21 passes. That is a good game plan for success. So all around, I'm happy with the backfield. Zach Wilson's day, 14 of 21, 212 yards. He didn't have any passing touchdowns, but he did have the rushing touchdown. And quite frankly, it was impressive. He had just his instincts took over. The pocket was collapsing on him from the left and from the front. He just took off out of the right and dove for the end zone. I was a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. Being at the stadium, I was very nervous every time he got hit. There was one play he had to get scraped up off the field by his offensive lineman, but he came back and scored the rushing touchdown. What were your overall thoughts of Zach Wilson? We saw way more RPO like we did last week and we talked about, and I think that is another key to success in this offense. But what did you think about Zach Wilson overall in his second game back?
I mean, look, the Bog, he didn't put up huge numbers. They didn't ask him to. They, as you said, game plan was run heavy, and the biggest thing to me, as I said, was the accuracy on the short stuff. And I think he sort of, he has to. You've got to see him bring his game to another level to where they can consistently ask him to throw the ball down the field, but not make that obviously, again, as you said, and I think we said a little bit this offseason, is that with the weapons they have, they should be able to lean on the run game. And then if it's not working, then you turn it over to Zach Wilson. So I was really happy with his performance. I think the number one thing is the no interceptions. And, we've seen that, his last sort of 8-9 NFL games, he's only thrown a couple of picks. So he's done a really nice job protecting the ball. And that really, it's the number one job of the quarterback. As much as you want to talk about, scoring is the objective. You just have to protect the ball. So it's, as long as he's doing that and the offense is still humming, I don't, he can not, if he doesn't throw another touchdown pass this season, I don't care if they keep winning, but in all reality, the numbers are going to come. The stats will be there. I was a little surprised we didn't see some shots down the field just because, once you hear Xavier Howard's out, you figure, okay, this team's going to be able to create some mismatches and make some plays down the field today. And they didn't even really try. I think off the top of my head, I think the deepest completion of the day was the 21-22 yarder to Corey Davis late in the game. And I don't know how long and I was going to discuss this one. I don't know how or when it's only frustrating because Sauce was called for it early in the game. The DPI where Sauce, they said he didn't turn around to locate the ball. It was 100 times worse later in the game when Wilson threw one pass downfield to Tyler Conklin. And the Dolphins linebacker had his face in Tyler Conklin's chest. The broadcasters are literally joking about the fact the ball bounced off the back of the guy's head. And I'm like, why isn't that a flag? I don't get it. And I'm not saying this to be hyperbolic. I said a year or two ago, probably longer than that, I just assumed that was no longer a penalty. You just don't see it called in the NFL.
Right.
Like I've seen, for every time I've seen that called, like not turning around to locate the ball, I've seen it not called 100 times. So I literally go through stretches where I forget it's a rule or I forget it's still a rule because it just doesn't get called. Called earlier in the game on the Jets, and then you see it happen to them and no call. And, everyone's yucking it up in the broadcast booth. And I'm trying to figure out, like, it was funny because I was actually, because the game was local, because you asked this question earlier in the season, and I said I wasn't sure. Because the game was on local TV, I couldn't watch on NFL.com. So I went to a sports bar actually up at the base here, on the base that I live near, and so it's all Americans in the bars. And the guy sitting at the table next to me, he was just a football fan. He wasn't a Jets fan. But he was watching it, and he commented to me a couple times during the game. And on that play, he looked at me and he was like, "Wasn't that worse than the one earlier when they called your guy for it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure as hell was." But no call. Again, I don't understand it. But yeah, getting back to Zach, not as many deep shots as I expected, but he managed the game the way they asked him to, and he protected the football.
Yeah, that was an absolutely egregious no call by the refs, considering how many they were calling on the defense. And we'll get into the defensive pass interferences for the Jets. But Zach Wilson's longest targets, he had 5 passes of 15 yards or more. He went 2 for 5. And that obvious one to Tyler Conklin that we talked about, that was 40 yards. Obvious face guarding by the linebacker there.
Yeah.
But that play in general was a great play. Zach Wilson, it was a play action. Somebody came free off the backside. I think it was Melvin Ingram. Zach Wilson did like a little pump fake, got Melvin a little stumbly, stepped back, did his point, and launched it. It was 53 yards in the air, and he
was it really? See, I'm playing in my head, and I'm trying to think, was that as deep as I thought it was? Like, I don't want to.
So Next Gen Stats has it landing at 40 yards past the line of scrimmage, but he backpedaled for 10 to 12 yards first.
Right.
So it was about 53 yards air. So he just flicked that thing. And it was obviously pass interference, but I like that from Zach Wilson. The other thing I did like from Zach Wilson, and I wanted to mention it a little bit last week, but I wanted to see it more. His top half and his bottom half, when he drops back to throw, are finally in sync. That's something that I watched last year. His feet would be pointed one way and he's trying to throw the other way. Now, finally, he's doing both in unison. And I think on those short swing passes that we saw last week, his fundamentals got away from him a little bit. But in this game against the Dolphins, he was dropping back top half, bottom half, mirrored. Everything looked good. His feet were in the right place. And I've only gotten through the first half, so I haven't seen everything. But for a second straight week, Corey Davis is routing up DBs. I watched the end of the Pittsburgh one last weekend and the start of the Miami game this week, and Corey Davis looks absolutely phenomenal. I know none of the wide receivers or tight ends got big action in this game. I think Garrett Wilson had 3 catches for 27 yards, all that went for first down. So I think that's probably like the best day, considering he moved the sticks on every single catch that he had. But this is what we've talked about. Somebody's going to have the hot hand in the game, and it's all about feeding them. And Mike LaFleur did. The running backs were the ones this week. Who knows what it's going to be in the weeks coming up, but this formula worked on offense. Another thing that worked on offense, and I think it's going to work no matter where you put him on the offensive line, and that's Elijah Vera Tucker. He played right tackle this week, now his 3rd position this season on the offensive line. 0 pressure, 0 sacks, according to PFF. He's just a stud. There's nothing he can't do. The Jets Twitter and Instagram team called him Elijah Versatile Tucker, and I thought that was very fitting. So Elijah Vera Tucker is my favorite for team MVP right now, 5 games into the season. I'm not sure if there's any. Maybe if Sauce Gardner continues to ball out like this,
Sauce,
but
right
AVT is that guy. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on AVT before we move into the defense and the offensive line as a whole, because it was another great performance from them. Zach Wilson wasn't running for his life. 0 sacks allowed. I think they gave the sack to the running back in pass protection. So all around good game from everybody on the offensive line. What were your thoughts, including AVT?
Yeah, I mean, listen, AVT is fantastic right now. You're seeing a lot of, the sort of the usual offensive linemen, even Duke Manyweather jumped in, these O-line guys on Twitter just saying they can't I'm going to try to put this out tonight or tomorrow. I interviewed former Jets offensive lineman Jason Fabini this morning.
Yes.
To talk to him a little bit about it, because he was kind of the first person that I was trying, as AVT is doing this, I'm thinking, who's the last Jets lineman? Nobody is doing what AVT did. But I was just thinking, who's the last Jets lineman to switch tackle positions to play really well in both spots, like for an extended period? And Fabini, Jason Fabini was drafted back in 98 by Bill Parcells, started at right tackle his first 2 seasons. And Bill Parcells notoriously didn't like rookies, didn't like starting them because they tend to make a lot of mistakes. But Parcells, Fabini was their starter from day one, played right tackle for 2 years, then moved to left tackle for his next sort of 5, 6, 7 years with the Jets before leaving in free agency eventually. And he then moved to guard when he went with the Washington Redskins. So he played them all. And, of course, everyone you talk to, but it's better. You like hearing it from the former offensive linemen who say you just can't really explain how good, what this or how impressive Elijah Vera Tucker is right now. And it's, it kind of, it reinforces the point that I made after he made the first switch, which was the thought of moving a lineman in season. And I know not everyone's capable of it, but I think people need to be a little more open to that. Again, maybe not left tackle to right tackle to guard, not 3 times in 3 weeks, for God's sakes, but The thing that comes to mind for me, and people can not like it all they want. I really don't care because it made sense at the time. Back when we thought Mekhi Becton was going to be coming back last season, I remember saying, I wouldn't mind because of how bad Greg Van Roten is, and because Mekhi Becton played right tackle in college, so he had played the right side. I thought I would try to work Becton in at right guard and bench Van Roten. And Twitter went crazy. You can't do that. You're a casual. You don't switch guys in season. Ha ha. You clearly have no idea. I'm like, God, it can be done. Like, players have done it.
For sure.
It's not, you don't want to do it, but desperate times, desperate measures. And it was desperate because Van Roten was that bad. And people were going nuts, screaming at me that you can't switch a guy in season. And I'm like, he's played the left side before, or the right. He's played both sides, both tackle spots. And to me, while the responsibilities are different, it's tougher to handle the tackle spot because you don't have that help on the outside. Sometimes you do, but generally speaking, you don't have that help that you have at guard. So I'd rather see a guy move from tackle to guard than guard to tackle. That's for damn sure. But just people were going nuts, and I'm like, I don't, again, they were desperate. The guard situation was a joke, and I would bet any position on the O-line, from left tackle to right tackle and everywhere in between, I would take Mekhi Becton over Greg Van Roten every time. I don't care if Mekhi Becton would need directions to where right guard is. I would still prefer him over Greg Van Roten because I think a clueless Mekhi Becton would be even if it was only a little bit better, would be a better option than Van Roten, especially right off the bat. So again, it can be done, folks, and we're seeing it now. It's not easy, but it's not mission impossible.
Yeah, I agree. It has to be, for me personally, it has to be like an emergency situation, like what the Jets are dealing with. But to say that it's impossible is just a farce, because even someone as old as Jason Peters on the Cowboys now, I think he's injured currently, but he played snaps at left guard this season next to Tyler Smith, their rookie, and he looked very good. So I think for Elijah Vera Tucker, you obviously have to be confident in your ability to go learn a new pass set, or the opposite motion of now your right foot's back as opposed to your left foot, or what have you. But I also think you have to be aware of yourself and how vulnerable you're making yourself, that if you don't look at this position, it could cost you a lot of money down the line. Now, obviously, Elijah Vera Tucker has smashed the glass ceiling, so to speak, of every position at this point, except for center. But what if he didn't look great at left tackle or right tackle? He was really putting himself out there as a young player who hasn't gotten paid yet to say, well, now here's a reason to not pay me. So I think you have to have a lot of balls, honestly, as an offensive lineman, especially a young one. And I loved his mic'd up because it was like, another day, I'm not going to take it for granted, another day to get better. So like, he's not going to take any of these opportunities for granted. Even if they did throw him at center, I think he could obviously handle it. But where is he going this week if there's no tackles coming back from injury? So he's got to be at right tackle at least one more week, right?
I would think that they keep this lineup going as long as it plays well, because as they say, right, play your best five. Yeah. Which I think is exactly what I said with the Becton thing. When the offensive line was a disaster, I thought, get your best five guys out there, and I was doing the math, and I'm saying, well, who's your worst guy? Get your worst guy off the field and replace him. This is when Fant was playing well at left tackle. But yeah, I say stick with this lineup as currently constructed, and if for some reason it doesn't work out moving forward, then you make some changes. But there's no reason not to. And how about I was glad to see today, because I planned on saying really the same exact thing. And Mike LaFleur stole my thunder a little bit today with his comments on Dwayne Brown. I mean, for that guy to come back, he's 37 years old. The Jets handed him $9.5 million, and he could have legitimately just had season-ending surgery and said, "Sorry, guys, I'm out. Take care. Got my $9 million." He hasn't been a Jet for 10 years. He doesn't know people in that building. He could have just been like, "There's a chance I can just walk out." And as a lot of guys, it would have. There's a lot of guys
for sure.
Hey, dude, you're 37. They just put $9 million in your account. Call it a career, and he didn't. And listen, I don't know Dwayne Brown well, but his first presser with the team, I'm not a big fan of pressers because guys, it really is a lot of it's fluff.
Yeah,
a lot of it's
coach speak.
there's really so little you can take from it,
Mhm.
whether it's a player or a coach. But and I forget his exact words, but when Dwayne Brown was signed, it was very sort of businesslike, and I think he almost kind of said, and I'm 1,000,000% paraphrasing here because I forget the exact quote, but the tone of it was, I don't really want to talk a lot because it's none of that matters. I have to play.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I'm not going to stand up here and tell you what I'm going to do. Just get me the pads and I'll go play, and you can decide for yourselves. It was like that type of comment. Um, and in an era where guys just seem to love to hear themselves talk, um, I was like, wow, I like this guy's demeanor. I like that he's a 37-year-old vet who understands that talk doesn't matter. It's about what
Mhm.
you do on Sundays. And the fact that that dude came back, man. Like I said, I read the quote today. I think Samini, a few people tweeted it out. But LaFleur said the same. I was like, that was my thought exactly when he came back, and when he came back and played well. I thought,
Mhm.
wow, this is going to be huge if he can stick it out through the season. And what a gutsy move for a guy whose career is 99% over, and you just got a huge check, and he could have just walked away with it.
Yeah, I believe it was following the loss to the Bengals. The SNY post game with Bart Scott, Willie Colon, and Connor Rogers. Willie Colon said, because they were talking about the offensive tackle position, and he said, "Hey, thanks for the $20 million, but I'm on a boat." In regards to Dwayne Brown, and I'm so happy that that is not the case. That is not his mentality. Dwayne Brown is exactly what you said. Just come in, put your head down, go to work, even at 37 years old, and that's going to set an example. That's going to trickle down throughout all the other four offensive linemen at a minimum. They're going to see how
Mm-hmm.
he works, and they're going to mirror that, and they're going to just play hard for him. Even if it's not specifically for him, they're going to see it, and they're going to want to mirror those actions. Sorry, my dog's playing with a toy.
Yeah, I think
So
I think I don't know if you heard Samini's podcast this week, and he kind of threw in a note that Woody Johnson was not happy at all. Like you handed this guy 11 million or whatever, 9 million, and he lasted 6 practices, and then it
mhm.
looked like he might be out for the year. And I mean, listen, we can say these guys are billionaires all we want, and that 9 million isn't a lot to them. It's like, well, it's not a lot to them, but it is still 9 million. Like
Absolutely.
I couldn't imagine handing someone 9 million and being, oh, it's a shame he's not going to play.
Yeah,
You'd
on to
want
the next one.
you'd want some answers, and so yeah, just I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I wanted to mention that I didn't know if you heard the Samini pod, who he does a good job. I
Yeah.
actually enjoyed the pod quite a bit.
Yeah, I think he gets a lot of flack, but his podcast does
He
have a
gets
lot
way
of
too much flack.
insider information that I think goes unnoticed because of how much shit he is getting. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, Dwayne,
he's gotten it for years. I don't understand it.
yeah,
I know, he will from time to time be a little bit snarky or whatever,
sure.
but uh, as a whole, like Jets fans just we're so defensive sometimes because it's been so many years of bad football. Um, that the number of times, sometimes I just laugh. Like I see fans lose their mind at something Samini says that I think is he's just telling you what happened. you know. And since only bad things happen, they associate Rich Samini with bad things.
Yeah,
You're always saying bad things about team, and it's like because they're always doing bad things. Like he has to report what the team is doing,
exactly.
and he may from time to time, like I said, every now and then he'll throw in a snarky comment that
Mhm.
doesn't bother me, but I'm like, oh well, that's gonna get people riled up. Like that's
Yeah.
those people that don't like you are screaming right now, and I think he does it for a little bit of fun too. But I have no problem with Samini.
Yeah, when you've been around as long as Samini has, you see too much and you see too much bad football. You're gonna throw one of those in there every time. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think people need to lay off a little bit. But defensively, again, game plan, probably the best game plan by far at this point.
yeah.
Obviously, we were playing with the lead, so it was easier to pin our ears back, get the front four going. I'm not sure. I believe it was Seth Walder. It could have been somebody else. Posted a analytics chart of front
It
four
was
and
probably Seth
pass
Walder
rush,
then.
and the Bills and the Jets were kind of in a tier of their own as far as we blitz with four, but we get home a lot. And they had it in an elite front four category. And I thought that was interesting because we've at nauseum said this is not what we want to see from our pass rush. We want to see a little bit more. So did this fit the description as to what you wanted to see? And is this sustainable moving forward, even without a 20-point lead in the fourth quarter?
Well, I'm glad you worded it that way because I wanted to cover this not just as it applies to the pass rush, but yes, this is, the best we've seen them all year. I said, I think it was just a couple series into the game, and I thought, Carl Lawson already looks better than he has at any point this season. Like, I thought he looked phenomenal. Finished the game with 7 QB hits, which is insane. JFM at 5, but this win, and not to get away from the defensive line focus of it, but the biggest things, in terms of as Robert Saleh says, right, like the view from 30,000 feet or whatever. The big picture is in terms of the whole roster. I talked after the last win about how I thought it was a bigger win than the Cleveland win, because the Cleveland win was more exciting, but not a sustainable way of winning football games. Like, it was basically a miracle. Then the next win was more exciting it was big because it was Zach Wilson methodically bringing the offense up and down the field, throwing the ball a couple times when the defense knew he was going to throw it. This one sort of takes the next step. Now, this one is big because when you win using your blueprint, like when you put your team together and say, what is our identity going to be? We're going to be a team that runs the ball and gets after the quarterback without having to bring extra blitzers. And that's exactly what the Jets did on Sunday. And when you start seeing the vision come into place, like, you can talk and talk and talk about how you're going to win games, but the Jets hadn't really won a game like that yet. But now they did. And yes, the defensive line was fantastic. Quinnen Williams had himself another really nice game. I haven't looked at the snap counts. I'm not sure. You know how many Bryce Huff played? He looked.
I think he had 16. I can check.
I was going to say I thought he almost doubled his count, and I think he had 9 the previous week.
And I think that might have had to do with Jermaine Johnson's injury, but
still,
he needed more. Yes, 15 was his total.
Okay,
22%.
So this was the first win we've seen where it played out the way. I mean, maybe you expect to see a little bit more, production from Zach Wilson throwing the ball, but it's a win. And we all saw the phone call, Robert Saleh to Zach Wilson saying, we're going to lift you up. We're not going to ask you to lift us up. Although there better be some Sundays where he does the lifting. Absolutely. But I get what Robert Saleh is saying. Like, he doesn't want it to have to be Zach. They want to be able to put together team wins where, you let the run game work and let the defense do their job. Let the front four get home, or at least get pressure to make the secondary's job easier. And we saw sort of a little bit of both this week. I think the secondary helped the D-line quite a bit. And I think we saw some plays where the D-line helped the secondary, and they just kind of worked in unison. So that's why this win, to me, rookie quarterback or not, and that's another thing with the Teddy Bridgewater thing. The Jets hit the quarterback 16 times. Teddy Bridgewater is not Michael Vick. As I said earlier, he's not Patrick Mahomes. He's a great guy. I love Teddy Bridgewater, the person. Like, everything you hear about him is like what a great dude he is, classy dude. But seeing them win a game exactly the way they plan on winning games is like, okay, now it's coming to life. You can talk all day about how you're going to win games, and if that never starts happening, it's almost like it wouldn't be luck, but a perfect example to me, that old, I mean, you probably don't even remember this. This is, but when the Ravens had that sort of, top 5 defense of all time, when they won the Super Bowl with Tony Banks and Trent Dilfer at quarterback, they won the Super Bowl, but that team hired Brian Billick as their head coach because of what he had just done in Minnesota as an offensive coordinator. And they were supposed to, we're going to have this great offensive mind. And they go out and win a Super Bowl beating everybody 6-3. And it's like, well, you'll take it for sure. Yeah. But Brian Billick didn't take that job and say, yeah, we're going to win a Super Bowl by giving up 3 points a game. Like, you can sort of turn out to be better than you expected in one spot. But this was the Jets being what we hoped they would be. And if you see more of that moving forward, it just builds credibility in the locker room with the fans in terms of the GM and the head coach.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard Saleh in press conferences multiple times break down quarter by quarter what they're doing on the sideline in terms of a game plan. So obviously the first quarter, you have your set game plan, your scripted 15. And then into the second quarter, you're learning still more about what the opposing team is doing, still trying to implement your game plan. And then third quarter is all about the halftime adjustments and who makes the adjustment to the adjustments, because obviously both teams are going to switch. You can't just say, okay, they were doing this in the first half, so if we do this, we'll stop it, because they're back in their locker room saying, okay, we didn't do this well, so how can we open this up? So it's all about adjusting and then adjusting to the adjustments in the third And then the fourth quarter is obviously just using what you've already known and learned about the opposing team and what they've been doing to just pin your ears back and go. There's no more, I don't have to slow foot a play because I don't know how this play action is going to develop anymore. No, I'm the backside defender. That's a play action look. I'm going to go get it, just like Sauce did on the first play. So these are all things that, and it's going to take time. Obviously, we love to give these coaching staffs zero time to implement their game plans and what have you. And this is the first time it actually came to fruition on both sides. Complementary football is what they've been preaching. So you have to hope that this is the standard going forward. Like Rob Saleh said in the victory speech in the locker room, make it normal. Make this game plan a normal game plan. It doesn't have to look the same every time, but whatever you set out to go do, make sure you do at least 75, 80% of that game plan, because if not, you're going to be adjusting on the fly. You're never going to get back to where you need to be. And you're never going to be competitive as a team. So that's what I love to see, was the game plan, the execution of the game plan. And like you said, Zach doesn't have to be a game manager. I hate using that term.
Right.
But if there's a week where he doesn't need to ball out,
from time to time
on your back, play to play, not game to game. Like that third down run for the touchdown. Put your team on the back for that play. Don't carry that in and go hero ball the next drive and think you're doing too much. So I think it was a perfect mix of game plan, execution, and collected thoughts, and everybody just staying calm in the moment and finishing out a win. It was 19-17 in the fourth quarter. We scored 21 points in the fourth quarter. That is unheard of. The Jets, I have a stat here that I'll try to pull up about fourth quarter. The Jets are first in points in the first quarter with 58. That's unheard of. Like, we're 11th in points per game scoring as a whole. So again, unheard of for our offense. So everything just kind of gelled together. And I don't care about the other team's circumstances. Like we said at the top, we've been there. We were the better team for now 2 weeks in a row, and for the fourth quarter of the Cleveland game. And I'll take that at this point of the season, when there's people like Brady Quinn saying we're going to be 1-8, 0-9, whatever.
That guy's an idiot.
Exactly. And the last thing I wanted to bring up on defense, Quinnen Williams. That guy's a dog. He absolutely stiff-armed Tyreek Hill into the turf. He might as well have just stayed down on the play, Tyreek Hill. I tweeted it out. I said, those income taxes must be a bitch, because they hurt on that play.
Yeah.
How you were at home, so you probably jumped out of your seat and yelled, but how exciting was it to see Quinnen Williams do that specifically to Tyreek Hill?
It was great. It was great, and I don't funny enough, the taxes thing doesn't bother me as much as the when he was asked about it, and he, who were the Jets?
Nah.
I get a little bit of jabbing players from time to time in teams, but I don't know. I thought that was not the classiest move. Listen, guys don't have to be classy. Not everyone's classy. I get it. You can say what you want, but I thought that was a nice little bit of poetic justice, to see him get thrown to the turf that way. I think the Jets, we've talked about Quinnen before. They're going to have some major decisions to make with him in terms of his contract moving forward. But I'm glad he's made that decision difficult. I'm glad he's put the Jets in a spot now where they have to think, okay, all right. And as I said earlier, as the owner, and we've talked. Do you go to your owner and say, Mr. Johnson, we'd like you to pay this guy $18 million a year to play 65% of the snaps? That's a big ask, I think. We want you to pay one of your part-time employees more than all the full-time employees. So it's or the full-time employees around the league, I should say. So I'm glad he's playing the way he is. He's been an absolute monster. I do, we won't even get into that. Who's it? I think it may have been on Samini's pod where he was talking about it. And I get these, just history shouldn't matter with this stuff, but man, you just think, God, every time we give out a big contract, it feels like it blows up on our faces. But Quinnen doesn't strike me as a guy, he's not a Mo Wilkerson. You're not going to see him mail it in once he gets paid. I think Quinnen's a guy who's going to keep going the way he's going, and hopefully get his brother back this week and let them, roll together in this defense against Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the snap count thing, because for once, I think somebody I don't know who it was. I'm not going to fault or, praise anybody, Sala or Ulbrich, but somebody decided to play this starting defensive line a little bit more. 65% for Franklin Myers, 70% for Quinn Williams. Finally, we're there.
Rarely
Hopefully
hits
it
70.
stays. 64% for Rankins and 73% for Lawson. So Lawson was 49 out of 67 snaps. So that's a substantial jump, from what we have seen. And it showed. Obviously, they were able to take their seatbelt off like Aaron White-Cotton did, and they took over this game. Obviously, they were playing with the lead towards the end, but they weren't always playing with the lead. It was a very close game. So please just play these guys 70%, even 65 plus, because this is ridiculous now. And yeah, Quinn Williams might have to back up the Brinks truck to him and his wife's house because
and 16 hits.
Yeah,
you played everybody, and you get 16 quarterback hits.
Yeah, exactly. Franklin Myers and Lawson had 15 pressures, just the two of them. Miami's defense had 3. So I don't care who your quarterback is. If you're getting hit that many times, you're probably not finishing the game at 100% health. And on the opposite side, your other quarterback is standing upright, clean in the pocket, making good passes when he needs to. So it was a winning formula all around for the Jets. I think that's a good time to transition into our Packers preview, because this is going to be a hard test. Their quarterback is not Tua Tagovailoa. It's not Teddy Bridgewater. It's not Skylar Thompson. Hell, even Jordan Love might be better than some of those guys, but it's Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back MVP. He's cerebral. He has enough mobility that he can make you pay outside the pocket. He's not going to gash you for big runs, but he will stand back there, make the quick throws, mitigate your pass rush. They have a 1-2 punch at running back. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, very similar to our 1-2 punch. They're a little different schematically in how they use him. A.J. Dillon's more of a heavier back, so he's inside the tackles as opposed to Breece Hall, but I think they're going to try to get them going. I listened to the Packers coordinators' press conferences instead of the Jets this afternoon, and somebody asked specifically about getting their running backs going, just like we did last week. And they said that will be an emphasis. They need to use their backs more. Obviously, their wide receivers have never been great other than Devontae Adams, and he's now gone. They have 2 rookies in Dubs and Watson. Both were Senior Bowl players that I saw up close, and I had a lot of good notes to say about both. Dobbs was a great 4th round or 5th round pick for them. And their offensive line as a whole, I think Eldon Jenkins is their AVT type. He can play all over the offensive line. They have David Bakhtiari, but he's still on the shelf. A bit of a weird situation going on there with his injury, but their offensive line can get after it. What do you think about this offense that probably hasn't played up to its potential so far this season? They just dropped the game in London to the Giants, and then they elected not to take their bye. So do you think that could come into play with the Packers maybe being a little tired coming back from London, and their offense might not be what they think it should be at week 6?
I mean, you hope so, right? You hope that long trip probably makes the week feel a lot shorter, coming all the way over from London, and that run game, that Green Bay run game with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are going to, I would imagine this is the game they're looking at as the one where things get going for them. Aaron Jones is at 6.4 a carry, which is kind of crazy this late in the season. That you might see that over the span of a couple games, but I think that's going to be the most interesting part of this matchup, because as a lot of people pointed out, while the Jets struggled against the run this week with Miami, we did see a lot of 3 safety looks, and it almost looked like the Jets were conceding the run on some plays just to avoid giving up the big play to Waddle or Hill. So I think the Jets went into that game saying, look, they're going to get their chunks. They're going to get some yards on the ground. We just want to avoid the 80-yard touchdown, the 70-yard touchdown to the big play receivers. And now you're playing Green Bay, where, as you just said, promising young rookies, absolutely, but they don't have Tyreek Hill and Waddle. So now this week, do you say, okay, we're going to clamp back down. We're going to, instead of that extra safety, we're going to have a linebacker out there, and we're just going to let Sauce and DJ Reed shut down these receivers, because they're certainly good enough to do that, as promising as these young guys are. So I think we're going to see the Jets, if he's healthy, I think we're going to see a lot of Quincy Williams this week. And by the way, we haven't given credit yet to Quan Alexander, who was also a monster last week. Another big game for him. So I think
Oh yeah.
maybe you see, I think maybe you see a lot more defensive calls with an extra linebacker on the field and pull that extra DB off and go with your backers up front. And if you can shut down that Packers run game, which I think should be the focus, because I think the Jets DBs are good enough to shut them down in man coverage. Especially, they're again the guys you would expect to be your big time guys on the outside. So yeah, I think that the Packers' inexperience at wide receiver is going to help the Jets focus on the run, and I'm not saying the Packers aren't going to get their yards on the ground. I think they will.
Mhm.
And Elgton Jenkins, he's an interesting guy. I think I said a while back we should start because you don't see a lot of people call themselves out for their bad draft takes. And
Mhm.
I love holding my own feet to the fire. Like
Yeah.
I'm not one of these guys that tweets out dumb stuff and then I'm going to pretend I never said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I poke fun at myself for supporting Mike McCagnon because I did plenty of draft picks in the past that I supported. But like Elgton Jenkins was a guy who he was Mississippi State, right? Yeah, he's a
Yes.
Mississippi State guy. And I watched a couple of his games, and he looked like a guy, not like a guy that quit. He didn't look like he was a whistle to whistle guy. Like
Oh,
he would
okay.
get a block, but the second the play was more than a couple yards from him, he shut his engine down.
Mhm.
Um, and I say it all the time. You're only watching 2 or 3 games per guy.
Yeah.
Maybe I picked a couple games where he wasn't 100%. I don't know. I just know I was like, I don't want that guy because he's a good player, but he keeps shutting it down once the play is away from him. Like I want that dude who I can see 15 yards away still blocking his guy into the opposing bench. Like that's what I want. And so Elton Jenkins, I was like, I don't know if that guy's going to make it. I don't know if he's got the motor for it. Turns out he does, and I was wrong. And that's these things happen. But yeah, he's a really good player. They do have some questions on that O line, but I think that we're going to see them try to establish the run against the Jets because I don't think they're going to have much choice. I don't think the receivers are going to be as big of a threat as they. I mean, later in their careers they will be. I don't think they are right now, but I think Reed and Sauce will have a solid day, and I think it's going to come down to how well the Packers run the ball against that Jets front.
Yeah, I'm glad you did mention Quincy and Quan because we do need to give Quan his flowers. He played, I think, 92% of the snaps, all but
Yeah.
4 or 5. So it was him and Mosley out there, like we've seen in the past with obviously not a solid defense, but with defenses of recent history. I think Greg Williams liked to do his 2 linebackers and 95% of the snaps. They're just going to stand out in the middle. So yeah, I think definitely going more base 4-3, especially if they're going to use both their running backs at the same time, just like the Jets did with Miami. I think you'll see a lot of that. We didn't address the obvious one. Their brother is the head coach. Michael LaFleur's brother is the head coach,
Yes.
excuse me. So our offense and their offense is going to look very similar. If you see the same formations and the same motions and the same setup plays, that's all because that's their brothers. So obviously it's going to look like that. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers brings you a different element than Zach Wilson. I don't think they do as much of the RPO stuff, like the long mesh handoff stuff. I think Aaron Rodgers does RPO stuff because of how quickly he can get the ball out at different arm angles. But Zach Wilson brings that more mobile element to it. So it's going to look a little different, but it's generally the same thing. And Michael LaFleur is 8 years younger, so he's learning from Big Bro the whole time there. So I thought that was a good point to make. Defensively, the Packers have struggled, but they have so much talent, including their front four. They do an odd front defense, so 3 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers. They usually use Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith as their outside linebackers. And then Kenny Clark is the one to watch in the middle. I know they have a couple other guys in there. I believe Tadaro Slayton from Florida is another one that's up and coming for their defensive line. And they also have Kingsley Enagbare from South Carolina, the edge rusher that they got this year. So they
he was one of those guys. Every time I talked about how deep this class was at edge, he was one of those guys that I thought was going to go later. And I forget where he went, but I think he did go later than I expected him to.
He was like a second. I think he was a 3rd round pick for the Packers, and then second round was like Ebiketie to the Falcons.
Yeah,
and they took
those 2 guys I kept lumping together. Ebiketie I liked more, but Ebiketie and Enagbare were guys that I kind of started watching around the same time, and I came away thinking that Ebiketie would be a 1st rounder, and Enagbare would be probably mid-second, but could end up being a guy who produces like a 1st rounder. Fun player to watch in college. I don't want to see them make any plays on Sunday, but I am interested in Enagbare, but I am interested in watching him.
Yeah, exactly. If you told me he was a top 50 pick in the draft, I wouldn't bat an eye because I had him up there with the Ebikades and stuff that went in the 30s and 40s. So yeah, he's definitely one that I'm going to be watching. And then I think their most talented section comes in their secondary. Jair Alexander is their main cornerback. They also have Eric Stokes, a second-year guy out of Georgia, and then Rasul Douglas, who's kind of had a resurgence career from Philadelphia. I think he led the team in picks after being a waiver claim last year, and he had like 2
Yes.
or 3 pick sixes. So he
I
was
was
very
really
clutch for
surprised the
them.
Jets didn't grab him when he
I
hit
know.
waivers last
Yeah.
year because he was a Joe Doug. He's drafted when
Yep.
Joe Douglas was there.
We
The
had
Jets
corner
had to need a
issues.
corner.
Yep.
Yeah, that was like a no-brainer. I think I remember saying in the preseason that he's a guy the Jets should give up a pick for if the Eagles were looking to move him.
Hmm.
Like, give up a day 3 pick to get the
Right.
guy. Yeah, so that's I feel like that was, I don't know, maybe they didn't like him in the scheme, but I thought he would have been a no-brainer pickup last year.
And something I thought that was interesting, like I said, I listened to the Packers coordinators' press conferences. Their defensive coordinator, Joe Barry, said that they don't want Rasul Douglas playing in the slot. Jair Alexander's been dealing with some injury issues early on in the season, so they've had to put Douglas in the slot. And Joe Barry said that they're really not trying to do that. They would rather put Jair Alexander in the slot. And most likely that means against Garrett Wilson. So what I'm thinking is Corey Davis and Elijah Moore on the outside versus Eric Stokes and Rasul Douglas. I'm okay with those matchups. Obviously, Garrett Wilson doesn't have an advantageous matchup against one of the best cover corners in the league in Alexander, but I think the perimeter will be the area of weakness if you have to pick one for the Packers. I know their linebackers do a great job with Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker in the middle. So do you think this is going to be a game where they do take some deep shots after having 5 passes that went 15 yards down the field? Do you think this is the game that they might take some more deep shots?
Yeah, I think anytime you're going to match up with a team, like I said, that was why I was surprised we didn't see more of it against the Dolphins, because you felt like they could create some mismatches, and they didn't, or they didn't take advantage of it. And I think that this week against the Packers, especially going against Aaron Rodgers, even though the Packers offense has been struggling, you have to figure Green Bay is going to find a way to put points on the board and kind of force you to have to make some plays on offense as well.
Yeah, and I was just checking the comments for the first time tonight. Andrew Gabrielson asked, which player should Sauce match up on the outside? If I'm picking just based off what we've seen so far this season, I think it's a clear no-brainer Romeo Doubs. Now, if they go with the size matchup, I think they might do it to Christian Watson. But at the same time, I think Sauce always has to be on your best corner, or at least a majority of the time on your best corner. I'm not going to say, roaming with him every single play. That's just not what the Jets do. But Saleh said they will match, which means man to a side. They will match to a side. So that means one side is zone, possibly DJ Reed, and then Sauce and whoever in the slot, Michael Carter, will have man to the other side. So I could see a lot of that situation. But if I had to pick one receiver specifically, it'd be Romeo Doubs. What about you?
I think I think that they're both going to be good matchups, but coming out of North Dakota State, I really did think that Wilkins was going to be an interesting player, and because of the size matchup, like two, tall, and I mean that dude can run. That that the guys his size don't tend to run that fast. So I'm looking for that's the matchup I'm looking forward to. I don't know how the Jets will match it up because I think because Dobbs is a pretty big guy too, isn't he? He's not like
6'2", I think.
Yeah, he's not as big as Wilkins on the other side, but he's still a big dude. But I think I like the Sauce matchup better. Although I think as you said, I think we'll see them. They'll spend time covering each guy. Sauce will see Dobbs a little bit as well. Who honestly I liked as well, but I didn't think he would I didn't expect to see him start this quickly. And he's playing well for them right now.
Yeah, down at the Senior Bowl, like I mentioned earlier, they were both there. They were both on the Jets team, so I got to see them all two out of the 3 days. The third day we weren't allowed inside the facility because of the rain, but Romeo Doubs looked like the better route runner and the better receiver in terms of hands. Christian Watson just did all the other things better. He was so much faster in and out of his breaks for his size. Everybody was enamored with that. Oh, a 6'4" guy getting in and out of his break on a short 10-yard comeback. It looks so nice. And I started to think that that's when the hype kind of built for Christian Watson to the point where he was a top 40 pick or top 45 pick for the Packers. And then a guy like Romeo Doubs, who does a lot of the same things well, but just doesn't have the full size and speed component, slipped out down the cracks to the 4th or 5th round, and the Packers were able to pick him up and plug him right in. So I think it's definitely a matchup to watch. We have one more question here from the comments, and then we can move on to our draft prospects. Another question about our defense comes from Mr. Talley. Do you think the Jets D-line can keep the pressure on Rodgers? Personally, I think so. We talked about their offensive line just a minute ago and how good they can be. There are still some younger players on that offensive line. I believe Sean Ryan from UCLA is a rookie that starts on their offensive line. So there are going to be some individual mismatches. I don't think anybody can stop Quinnen Williams right now. And that's the best route to Aaron Rodgers, is right up the middle. If Aaron Rodgers gets around the edge and you can have him step up in the pocket, it's a nightmare, because that just means that the wide receivers are 5-10 more yards down the field. Come right up the middle, right on Aaron Rodgers' lap, force him to make a bad throw. And I think that would be the recipe for success in terms of pass rush pressure, would be straight up the middle interior with Quinnen Williams. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, having said earlier about how the O line or the D line and the secondary worked hand in hand last week, Aaron Rodgers is another one of those guys where that has to happen because the ball comes out so quickly. So if you don't have tight coverage, he's gonna find the guy who's open and the ball's out in under 2 seconds. Under a second and a half, really, a lot of times with him. Seriously. So it's going to come down to the secondary making it difficult for Rodgers to make those quick throws. And if the secondary is able to do that, I think you will see the D line get home. And I think I still have the Dolphins on the brain a little bit. I think I called Christian Watson Christian Wilkins. But yeah,
I didn't pick that up. Yep.
I played it back in my head. I was like, I think I said Christian Wilkins, who's of course the DT for the Dolphins.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's the way to get to him. You got to press those receivers, and you can't give him any separation, because if you do, or you can't allow quick separation, because if you do, he's a guy that's going to pick you apart. And that was a thing that, speaking of those receivers, that was one thing that jumped out to me about Watson, was for a guy that size, for his frame. I felt like it's tough. That's the problem with the small school guys, right? Is finding the film. But from what I did see, he was able to, and more so in Mobile, his ability to make those, to be quick and in and out of his breaks a lot quicker than you would expect for a guy his size, and create that quick separation. So that's something to keep an eye on, because that's how you get to Aaron Rodgers, is make him hold the ball that little bit, split second longer than he wants to.
Exactly. And again, I'm going to be redundant, but I do the game plan preview every week. And although it's an advantageous one for the Jets, it's still not one that I feel comfortable about because of the passer. So Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed versus Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, you got me doing it too, will be one of my matchups to watch in my preview. Absolutely. All right. I think that covers it. Last thing I would say about the Packers is their special teams for recent history, the past 2 to 3 years. I know they had a coaching change and got Rich Bisaccia from the Raiders. He was the interim coach when they fired Gruden. He's now their special teams coach, but it's still not a great unit. They were bottom of the league last year in almost all measures. But this year they're a little bit better, but I think that would be, the underrated hidden door number 3, where the Jets have a matchup that they can take advantage of, because our special teams does look very good. Braxton Berrios had another long return after the safety. I think it was 45 yards or something like that. He almost got to midfield or just past midfield. So special teams is definitely going to be an area to watch against the Packers, where the Jets could take advantage. All right, moving into the 2023 draft talk. Again, just like last week, I brought some names to the table that have been doing very well recently. I'm not exactly sure how well they will translate to the NFL, or if they will even be prospects at the end of the season. Some still have eligibility left. Some are seniors on my list. I brought 3 names, but I'm going to let you kick it off on this comment here, or on this topic here.
A guy that, I said last week how, we're watching so many guys that there are some players you really, really like, and then they get lost in the shuffle, and you realize, wow, we're 4 or 5 games into the season, and I haven't really watched this guy yet. Last week I'd mentioned Zay Flowers from Boston College, but another guy who could have easily been on the list, and he blew up. And when I saw it was a late game and I was going to get to watch it, I was pretty pumped. Zach Charbonnet, the running back from UCLA.
Yes.
Really nice combination of size and power. You'll find plenty of. He's one of those guys. You'll find highlights of him running through guys. You'll find highlights of him running around guys. You can use him on the goal line. He catches the ball. From what I've seen, he doesn't get a ton of targets, but when he has been targeted, he catches the ball well out of the backfield. Just a really thick lower half. He's going to be a tough guy to bring down at the next level. And he played last week, and he absolutely blew up. And only two guys for you this week, actually. And I can't remember if we talked about this guy last year. I know we talked, about Texas receivers quite a bit, but Jordan Whittington is a guy who I don't think is getting talked about enough. And I was kind of reminded of him. I was watching that Texas game this week, and man, he had a beautiful diving catch. And I just remember thinking, he was, again, Xavier Worthy is the guy I've been sort of hyper focused on with Texas because from the first game I watched, he was just a monster.
He pops off on you.
Yep. Yeah. And I think I left him out last week when I said to you during the offseason or early, very before the season, when I said, my top 3 or 4 receivers were Addison, Josh Downs, and I think I mentioned Butte, but I think Worthy was the guy I left out.
Yeah.
From those, and I think it was, it was Worthy, Addison, and Downs who were the 3 guys I was most looking forward to watching this year, even though of course they wouldn't all be draft eligible. But yeah, Addison's another guy who makes plays for that Texas offense, and I love the way the way those receivers were blocking last week was phenomenal. So they make plays through the air, and they do the little things. So Texas is a sort of an emerging team at the moment. Just imagine when Arch gets there. So just fun team to watch. The running back that although DeMarvion Overshown, I'm not even sure. I feel like when I didn't see him much last week, and I remember thinking, is he hurt? Because
me neither.
Flipping back and forth between so many games.
Yeah, it's tough.
And when I'm down to one game, sometimes I just grab the laptop and I pull up a game from last week to watch players. So I'm always watching multiple games. But at some point I remember thinking, like, why haven't I seen DeMarvion Overshown yet? I was going to look into that and see if he's dinged up.
Yeah. Before I get into my comment or my prospects, we have a comment from Jets Gang. He said free safety, linebacker, and I'm going to assume offensive tackle next year in the draft in that order. So that means the Jets are going to draft a defensive lineman at whatever pick they have. So that's fine. I now have 2 prospects to bring to the table because I changed mine last second. I had Roschon Johnson, the backup running back for Texas. And then I switched it last minute and didn't tell you to Jordan Whittington. So
Jesus.
So I'll go.
I knew you were doing a Texas running back, and I thought, let me do the receiver. I really like that guy.
Yeah, I pulled the change up on you, so that's and I'm glad I let you go first for that reason. Whittington, though, what I had down 210 or 6'1", 215, are his measurements. This year he has 26 catches, 354 yards, and 0 touchdowns. But last year he had 26 catches, 377 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and that was with an injury mid-season. I believe he played 3 or 4 games and then missed a bunch and then came back for the end. And in that time period, their head coach, Steve Sarkisian, offensive guru, said that Jordan Whittington was their best wide receiver pre-injury. So for those first 3 or 4 games of 2021, which I will go back and watch now that Jordan Whittington is popping off like this, he was the best receiver Texas had. And I'm excited to see that because they didn't have Quinn Ewers or any of they probably had Hudson Card still, but they don't have that top prospect guy that everybody's, watching Texas for. So I thought Whittington was good. You mentioned it, the blocking. It reminded me of the Corey Davis interview from a couple days ago that we brought up last week. It's a mindset. Blocking is a mindset. And Jordan Whittington displayed it. Mm-hmm. They had a little tunnel screen that went for a touchdown. And it wasn't a touchdown if Jordan Whittington doesn't do his job and block 15,
that
20
was
yards
the
down the
play
field.
I had in mind.
Yeah. So he's definitely going to gain the eyes of a lot of scouts for that element of his game. But like you said, he had a diving catch across the middle, and he has done that from time to time. You go to watch guys like Worthy, Bijan, Roschon, the quarterback, whoever, and Whittington pops up. He just kind of shows up on the screen. He's not really, a flashy guy. Like you said, Worthy, we said popped off the screen to you, but Whittington, gets the job done. And I think that'll definitely boost his stock come draft time. I believe he is a senior too. So it's one of the best times because he can come out in the All-Star games, Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, and really put out his best version of himself. Um,
Yeah, I think Whittington. I'm looking at Texas team website. They have him listed as a junior.
I wonder if that's COVID. He might be a
Yeah,
junior, but
that's the
would be a
thing. COVID kind of
senior
messes all
because of
this up. You
COVID.
don't know.
Yep.
You don't know who's what. But and it does look like Overshown did. I might go back and rewatch that Texas game tonight because the NFL game is not very good. And
No.
check Overshown. He had 6 tackles in that game. He
Oh,
hasn't.
okay.
We haven't seen the splash plays from him this year. Not a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
was gonna say he didn't pop to me enough to say, "Wow, okay, Overshown's really
yeah.
doing well this game." So, all right, my next guy, bouncing off your guy Charbonnet, I stick with the running backs as well. This is the guy that we've talked about off air. I kind of took him, and you took Charbonnet. We were mutually 1-1. Israel Abanikanda from Pittsburgh. He's 5'11", 215. I probably butchered his last name, but that's okay. This
No,
last
but
week,
it's a Banacanda. That's how you say it.
that's what the broadcaster said. So I wanted to say it how he said it, just in case I can blame
Right?
him
Yeah.
later if it's wrong. But Abanikanda, yeah, he ACC record last week, 320 yards and 6 touchdowns. I believe the 6 touchdowns is the record, not the 320 yards. That's his 4th 100-yard game of the season, and he's had a touchdown in all but one game. Week 1, he had a receiving touchdown, not a rushing touchdown, but every other game he's had a rushing touchdown except for one game. And last season, I was looking at his stats on Pro Football Reference. He only had one game over 100 yards rushing. So a complete 180 turnaround to have 4 games out of 6 with 100 yards rushing. So Abanikanda is doing really well. He has 129 rushes, 830 yards, and 12 touchdowns, which are all career highs for him at this point in the season. So you stack on the other half of that season, and his numbers can really be inflated to look very good for his career. Add 60 yards and a touchdown through the air. My 2 biggest points as far as the film, vision to find the hole. And then once he finds the hole, he just goes through it. There's
He's so
no
explosive.
patience.
He's so explosive.
And I'm not going to say there's no patience, but that patience to
There's no hesitation.
is not, yes, no hesitation. Exactly. He just goes. And I think we saw with Jahmyr Gibbs a couple weeks ago from Alabama, that same type of thing, and he broke 2 70-yard runs. So Abanikanda's kind of that same mold of vision, quickness, speed combo.
Yeah.
Not going to make guys miss a lot. He's not like a bulldozer, which the next guy I'm going to get into is, but he can definitely get the job done from a speed perspective. So I like Abanikanda. My second running back, another big school, Michigan, Blake Corum, small, 5'8", 200 pounds. But just because he's small does not mean he plays small. He's not afraid to lower his head, absolutely just go through the offensive line. A lot of times he ends up in free space, and he'll still make you miss. I mentioned he's 5'8", so he's small. You can get hidden behind the offensive line a little bit, use that patience, find the hole, and go. And if need be, Blake Corum can do the dirty work. I don't want to say he's like Maurice Jones-Drew, but he's of that type of mold where he's not afraid.
That type of build, though.
Yeah, contact is welcomed in Blake Corum's in his mind. So this year, 118 rushes, 735 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He had 950 yards and 11 touchdowns all of last year. So just like Abanikanda, we're halfway through the season, and they're matching their totals from last season. So obviously that has to do a lot with the workload and who else was in the backfield with them last year. And I'll do a little bit more research to find out. Obviously, Hassan Haskins, I think, was taking carries from Blake Corum last year.
Yeah.
But these guys, now that they're the workhorse, they're absolutely balling out. And I think it's time that running backs get brought into the discussion. The Jets have a running back that they drafted early and got, poo-pooed on for doing it. And I think it's not the case anymore where there are these tough physical backs that can be a workload. But if you get them in a committee, like with Breece Hall and a Michael Carter situation, they're just going to do great things. So running backs, I think, are kind of making a revival in the draft world, at least in my perspective. I think they are. And I think these 2 guys, and obviously Charbonnet, he's been a staple for the last 2 or 3 years at UCLA, who undefeated, by the way, kind of crazy. I think these backs are going to make people think twice about draft ranking and positional value a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a little bit more, and I've for years I've said, don't waste premium picks on running backs because you see it all the time. You see teams, when the Pats were winning Super Bowls, they never had a great back, or at least early on. They were like Corey Dillon and Antoine Smith, who were nice players,
Yeah.
But they're not sort of these game-breaking highlight reel making guys. I mean, well, Dylan was early in his career, of course, but later on with the
Yeah.
Pats, not so much. But yeah, the Brees Hall thing, I think that's something I was more receptive to, and I didn't freak out because they had so many early picks. If they only had like one first and they used it on a back, I probably wouldn't have been thrilled. But it's
Right.
like
He was
you
their
addressed
fourth
premium
pick.
spots. Yeah,
Yeah.
you addressed edge, you addressed corner, like you addressed premium spots before you took the running
Wide
back.
out. Yep.
Yeah, exactly, which is absolutely, have no issue with that at all. And it'll be interesting to see because I think with obviously the NFL isn't what it is. You don't have guys carrying the ball 30 times a game. You want that dual. You want a two-headed monster back there. Everybody does, and it's easier to get one if you take one early on and get yourself a game breaker. And I think there are some really good backs coming out. Abanikanda, I tweeted about him a few weeks ago. I think I actually started a thread about him too on there's a draft forum on JetNation.
Okay.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the forums at JetNation.com. I think 2 weeks ago, I started a thread about him and said, like, keep an eye on this dude. He's not getting enough. He's not getting talked up enough. And I can't remember the name of the backup because there's someone said to me in there that his backup is better suited for the pro game. So I went and watched some of his carries, and he looks. I forget his name now because it was the first time I'd watched him extensively. But man, big, strong guy, one touchdown run. I think it was against Virginia Tech, like dragging like four guys with him.
Okay.
So, and I remember, I knew I didn't know the name, but I knew because I watched a ton of Pitt last year because I love the D line and I love the Abanikanda, and I loved Addison. But I remember thinking at one point, like I was focused on Abanikanda, but at some point I remember thinking like, wow, they're actually deep at running back. Like, because there was a game he didn't play much, and the running game just kept going. And I remember thinking they got some really good backs at Pitt, and they do.
Yeah. I think my first exposure to Abanikanda was when I was watching Kenny Pickett, obviously, and then Jordan Addison too. But yeah, you're watching one guy, and all of a sudden, and this happens, both of us do this when we're watching prospects. You start on one guy, and then by the end of the game, you probably have like 4 or 5 names written down of, okay, now I got to go back and rewatch this guy because I'm seeing some more talent than at first surface level.
Yeah, I think a lot of my favorite guys. That's how you find them. I talked a lot about. Several games. Yeah, it happened to me several times last year. You're just watching one guy and somebody else pops, and you're like, wait a minute. And you write Jacoby Windman. He was. I was watching that game to watch a Utah State receiver, and Windman has like 17 tackles. I'm like, write this guy's name down. And I think they got blown out, but I think he had a sack last week against Ohio State or a half a sack. But that's what happens, man. You watch a million games, guys are going to pop out that you weren't intending to watch, and then you go back and watch them.
Exactly. I think that's the beauty of the draft cycle, because you hear all the big names from the big market outlets of like, I don't want to, like the Draft Network, and these guys put out names, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but that's not all the names out there. And I think once you do it for yourself, like you and I do, and you have that freedom to, okay, I'm not looking at this team specifically. I have the freedom to look at all these teams. You find tons of guys that could be that diamond in the rough, even if they are a 4th or 5th round guy. You could find a guy that you like more than the consensus. And hey, if he pops off, you just look real good. So I think that's the beauty of the draft cycle. Obviously, you're going to get the hyped up people that don't do anything, and vice versa. So it's a good time. I think that's what makes it interesting for us. And as long as the Jets keep doing well, I'll probably watch less draft stuff, but at the same time, it's fun to, turn off the Jets stuff, even after a win, turn it off and just watch some college kids and see what they can do, because this is the future of the league. Regardless if they play for our team or not, you're going to see these guys in 3, 4, 5 years, and you're going to be like, wow, I remember this guy. I wrote him up, and these were my thoughts. Like, I go back to Deebo Samuel all the time. I wrote in my scouting report, he could be a running back, even literally out of the backfield running back. And that's kind of what happens. So it's nice to just hang your hat on these little tiny things, make you feel like you know what you're doing. And at the end of the day, we don't know shit and we don't know what we're doing. But
I say all the time, man, the best GMs in the NFL hit on 50%. The best.
Give me 50%.
The guys that fans want to build statues for. I think Ozzie Newsome even said, if you look at his last 3 or 4, not his last draft, but like the 3 before that, they weren't good. Like, this is Hall of Fame guy, and you get these GMs with these draft classes. Bill Parcells. Here's a quick stat for you, Dylan. I'm gonna throw this out at you because only I have it written down here because I mentioned it to Fabini while I was talking to him because I've always sort of viewed him as one of the best value picks in my time as a fan. He was a 4th rounder, 111 overall, and was a very good player on some deep run playoff teams. Jets were actually they only had one Jets-like year. His final season when he was injured, they went 4-12. Other than that, I don't know that he had more than 1 or 2 losing seasons. But so here's the number I threw at Fabini. I looked this up a few years ago. Let me make sure I get this right. Okay, so from 1995 to 1999, the Jets drafted 45 players because they did a lot of wheeling and dealing. They had some drafts where they had like 12, 13 picks. So from 95 to 99, they drafted 45 players. 4 of them got a second contract. Out of 45.
So bad.
And he was one of them. And he was the only offensive guy. It was Ray Mickens, Marcus Coleman, and Jason Ferguson.
When did you say he was drafted? What was his draft slot?
98, 111.
4th round, pick 111.
Yeah.
Max Mitchell's exact draft slot.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing.
There you go.
I my eyes lit up when you were talking, completely off topic, but we have to do this before we go. We forgot this a couple weeks ago. I need a score prediction. What's happening in Lambeau? Are the Jets going to 4-2? Are they going to be 500? What's up? What do we got? What's your prediction?
I can't. I think they can win this game, but I can't bring myself. I'm not at the point where I can say the Jets are going to go to Lambeau and beat Aaron Rodgers. But you know what? I'm going to say it. Screw it. I'm going to say it. I like the way the Jets match up against these receivers. I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, listen, you're not playing the ghost of Aaron Rodgers. You're not playing the old Packers teams. I like the way the Jets match up against this team. It's not going to be, it's not going to be a snowy, frigid day. So yeah, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to say the Jets win. Give me the Jets 23-17 Jets.
Okay, yeah, you went a little bit lower, and I have these exact same thoughts. All these matchups that just look advantageous on the Jets side, and then I just circle back, and I'm like, God damn it, they still have number 12. And I feel like that's going to be the factor. If we see MVP Aaron Rodgers, it's probably not going to look great.
Yeah.
If we don't see MVP Aaron Rodgers, this game is 100% winnable. I don't think there's a game on this remaining schedule with the team we saw last week, outside maybe Buffalo, that isn't winnable anymore. I think that narrative needs to be put to bed a little bit. The Jets are going to be in games that are quote unquote winnable. It's not going to look the prettiest every single week like we talked about, but they have winnable games outside of maybe Buffalo. And I think this is another one. I'm going to go a little bit higher scoring, kind of reminiscent of Sam Darnold's game back in 2018. I believe it was the end of his rookie year. Probably the best game of Sam Darnold's career still to this point. I'm going to go 31-28 Packers. It's going to be a shootout. I think they can match touchdown for touchdown. That's not something I've had confidence in the Jets even this season saying. So for me to, say 28 in a loss, I'm okay with that because I think it'll look a lot better. And if it's, a one-score loss that we can hang our hat on with a lot of, I don't want to say moral victories, but, matchups that go our way, I think 31-28 is a sufficient score, and it could very well be 31-28 the Jets, and Greg Zuerlein's kicking a last-second field goal to win it. So I think that's where we're at as a team. The fact that the Packers are scared of the Jets, they're talking in their locker room about, oh, we can't lose to the Jets. Like we are only going to be nervous if we lose to the Jets. Well, shit, that's a real possibility. Well, you could lose to the Jets. I'm not going to say, it's a guarantee, but the Jets they're not the doormat anymore. We're ascending. Even Dan Hansis, who does the power rankings, and he's very, timid about where he ranks the Jets. He put him at 17. 17.
Yeah, and I think
new territory for the Jets.
I think the big thing is that the fact, and I mentioned it earlier, the fact that it's a passing league and they have 2 stellar corners that are going to, this is why we're not seeing these games like we had last year. And, again, we're like 20 minutes over. We can't go all night, but the last 2 weeks, and again, it helps that they haven't played the greatest quarterbacks in the world. The safeties have been much better. The tackling from the safeties. I meant to mention that Jordan Whitehead last week. I said during the game, much better version of this is the guy when they signed him, and I said he was a good tackler. Yep. That's the guy I saw, not the guy who wasn't tackling well the first few games of the season. So The safeties have been better. The corners are obviously upgraded. So the secondary isn't a cakewalk anymore for opposing offenses.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a complete turnaround. People needed to be patient. Saleh said 4 new faces in the back end. And hey, a couple weeks later, it turned out to be the truth. So I think we all just need to, relax a little bit when things don't look the prettiest. And that being said, I don't know if this game's going to be the prettiest, but I think the Jets should be in it till the last second. We're going to hope, obviously, that they are. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers, you can't stop him if he's going to unload and go for 304 touchdowns. You can't help that. What you can help is stopping the running backs, getting pressure, especially on the interior, and making it close in the fourth quarter. Because once that happens, it's anybody's game. You saw the Giants do it in London. I tweeted a couple things to you about Aaron Rodgers where there's some tells that the defense should key in on and take advantage of. So with that being said, everybody, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciated all your comments, all your questions. We love it. We'll get probably around the bye week. We'll probably do more of a interactive, exclusive podcast where we're just answering all your questions, all your comments, concerns about any players you want. So thanks for listening. Obviously, for Glenn Naughton, you can follow him on Twitter at AceFan23. You can follow me at Tereman. Obviously, follow us at JetNation, at JetNation Radio. Glenn always puts out good content on the site. Check it out. I do the game plan article and the injury report every week. So we're always pumping out new content. And as the wins keep stacking up, it just makes it a lot easier to want to put out this content for you guys. So we're super appreciative of everybody that tuned in. Let's go Jets. Until next week, let's put Aaron Rodgers on the ground. Have a great night, everybody.